My name is Samuel Washington, and I'm 68 years old. Been living in this same house on Maple Street in Birmingham, Alabama for 43 years now. Built it myself, brick by brick, beam by beam, back when my hands were steady and my back was strong. Martha used to stand on the front porch with sweet tea, watching me lay that foundation, telling me I was working too hard in that August heat. "Slow down, Sam," she'd say. Rome wasn't built in a day. But I knew something she didn't. I was building more than just walls and a roof. I was building security for our family, a legacy that would stand long after I was gone. Lord, how wrong I was about that legacy part. Martha's been gone 7 years now, taken by cancer that ate through her like termites in old wood. The house feels bigger without her laughter echoing through these rooms I crafted with my own 2 hands. But I stayed strong, kept the foundation solid for our 3 children, Keisha, Marcus, and Devin. Figured it was my duty as their daddy to make sure they never wanted for nothing, the way I did growing up in Bessemer with holes in my shoes and empty belly most nights. I spent 40 years swinging hammers, running my own construction company, Washington & Sons, though none of my sons ever showed much interest in actually working. Built half the commercial buildings on the south side of Birmingham, saved every penny I could, invested smart. Not rich, but comfortable. Comfortable enough to help when my children came knocking, which seemed to be every other week these days. The warning signs were there, clear as cracks in concrete, but I kept patching them up instead of addressing the real problem. Should have listened to my brother Jerome when he pulled me aside at Martha's funeral. "Sam," he said, gripping my shoulder with those calloused hands that looked just like mine, "you done raised them kids to depend on you for everything. What happens when you ain't here no more?" I brushed him off then, told him they just needed time to find their footing. But sitting in my kitchen this morning, looking at another stack of bills they'd left for me to handle, I'm starting to see the truth Jerome saw 7 years ago. My children don't see me as their father anymore. They see me as an ATM machine with a pulse. Keisha's 38 now, my oldest girl, smart as a whip but can't seem to hold down steady work. Always got some new business idea that's gonna make her rich. Last year it was a food truck that never rolled, year before that, a boutique that closed in 3 months. Each time she comes to me with those big brown eyes that look just like her mama's, talking about investing in her future. What she really means is reaching into my pocket for another few $1,000s that I'll never see again. Then there's Marcus, my middle child, 35 years old and still living like he's 25. Works part-time at the auto parts store when he feels like showing up. Spends his weekends at the casino down in Mississippi. Came to me last month with a sob story about being behind on rent, needing $1,500 or he'd be on the street. Found out later from my neighbor, Mrs. Johnson, that she saw him buying rounds for his buddies at that sports bar on 5th Avenue that same night. Devin, my baby boy at 32, might be the worst of all. College educated, paid for every semester myself, but acts like the world owes him something. Works some desk job downtown that he's always complaining about, talking about how his talents are being wasted. Meanwhile, he's driving a BMW I co-signed for, living in a condo I helped with the down payment for, wearing clothes that cost more than I spent on groceries in a month when I was his age. The 3 of them got together for Sunday dinner last week, sitting around my dining room table that I made from oak I milled myself. Should have been a blessing having all my children under one roof. Instead, felt more like a board meeting where I was the only item on the agenda. "Daddy?" Keisha started, using that sweet voice she saves for when she needs something. "We've been talking, and we're worried about you living here all alone." Marcus nodded along like a bobblehead. "This house is too big for one person, Pops. All these stairs, this big yard to maintain. You're not getting any younger." Devin, always the one with the fancy words from that college education, chimed in. "We've researched some really nice senior living communities, places where you'd have people to talk to, activities, medical staff nearby." I set down my fork, filled with the pot roast I'd spent all afternoon cooking for them, and looked at my children. Really looked at them. Saw how they wouldn't meet my eyes, how they kept glancing at each other like they'd rehearsed this whole conversation. "Y'all want to put me in a home?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "Not a home, Daddy," Keisha said quickly. "A community. And think about it. You could sell this place, get a nice chunk of money to enjoy your retirement. That's when it hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. They weren't worried about my well-being. They were worried about their inheritance. Worried that I might spend their money on myself instead of keeping it safe for them to fight over when I'm dead. The foundation I'd built, not just this house, but the whole structure of our family, had been rotting from the inside for years, and I'd been too blind, too willing to keep patching the cracks, to see what was really happening. My children weren't just ungrateful. They were parasites, feeding off everything I'd worked for while giving nothing back but empty promises and fake concern. But I built this house to last, and I wasn't about to let anybody, not even my own blood, tear down what I'd spent a lifetime building. Sitting in my recliner that night after they left, I started adding up the numbers in my head. Not just the dollars, though Lord knows there were plenty of those, but the years of manipulation, the broken promises, the way they'd slowly chipped away at my dignity like water wearing down stone. It started small, the way these things always do. Right after Martha passed, when I was still raw with grief, and the house felt like an echo chamber of memories. Keisha came by with her 2 kids, my grandbabies Aaliyah and Jeremiah, talking about how hard it was being a single mama. Her ex-husband had split, leaving her with nothing but bills and heartache. "Daddy, I just need a little help getting back on my feet," she said, bouncing little Jeremiah on her knee. "Just enough to cover daycare so I can look for work." Course I helped. What grandfather wouldn't? 500 here, 1,000 there. Money for daycare became money for rent. Rent money became car repair money. Car repair money became emergency money for things that never seemed to have clear explanations. That food truck dream of hers cost me $12,000. She had it all planned out. Ms. Keisha's kitchen, serving soul food to the working folks downtown. Had charts and graphs, business plans printed out all fancy. Talked about how it would honor her mama's memory, serving Martha's recipes to the community. "This is it, Daddy," she said, spreading those papers across my kitchen table. "This is my chance to build something lasting, like you did with your construction business." The truck sat in my backyard for 8 months, rusting like a monument to broken dreams. Turned out she never got the proper permits, never secured the spots downtown she'd promised. When I finally asked what happened to all that planning she'd done, she just shrugged and said the city made it too complicated for small business owners. Marcus was slicker about it. Never asked for large amounts, always had a story ready. His car broke down, needed $800 for repairs. Behind on utilities, needed $300 or they'd cut the power. Got hurt at work, and workers' comp was taking forever. Needed $1,000 to hold him over. I found out about the gambling purely by accident. Mrs. Johnson's nephew worked security at that casino. Told her he'd seen Marcus there regular as clockwork, betting money like he had it to burn. When I confronted him about it, he got defensive, started talking about how he was just trying to make some extra money to pay me back. "Pops, you don't understand," he said, pacing around my living room like a caged animal. "I got a system, just need a little more capital to make it work." More capital. That's what he called my hard-earned money, capital for his foolishness. But Devin hurt me the most because he was the smartest of the 3, the one who should have known better. After college, he got that job at the insurance company downtown, started making decent money. But decent wasn't enough for Devin. He wanted to live like those rich white boys he'd gone to school with. The BMW was the first big ask. Came to me talking about how he needed reliable transportation for work, how it was an investment in his career. His credit wasn't quite good enough on his own. Could I co-sign? Just this once? That just this once became a pattern. The condo downtown with the fancy address, the designer clothes, the expensive dinners at restaurants I couldn't pronounce the names of. Each time, it was an investment. Each time, he'd pay me back. Each time, I believed him because I wanted to believe him. The breaking point should have been when he brought that girl home, Tiffany, with her fake nails and fake hair and real expensive taste. She looked around my house like it was something that needed fumigating, made little comments about upgrading my furniture, suggesting I might be more comfortable in a modern place. At Christmas dinner, she actually had the nerve to ask when I was planning to update my kitchen. "These appliances are so vintage," she said, wrinkling her nose at the stove I'd bought brand new 15 years ago. Don't you think it's time for something more contemporary? Devon just sat there, nodding along like she was making sense. My own son, agreeing with this stranger that everything I'd built wasn't good enough. That's when I started seeing the pattern clear as blueprint lines on white paper. Every visit came with a request. Every phone call ended with a need. Every family gathering turned into a pitch meeting with me as the only investor stupid enough to keep throwing money at failing projects. They'd learned to work me like contractors learn to work difficult clients. Keisha would bring the grandkids when she needed something big, knowing I couldn't say no with those little faces looking up at me. Marcus would wait until I'd had a few beers, catch me in a good mood. Devon would use his education, dressing up his requests in fancy language that made them sound reasonable. But the worst part wasn't the money. Money's just paper, just numbers in an account. The worst part was watching them lose respect for me with every dollar I handed over. The more I gave, the less they valued what I'd given. The easier I made their lives, the harder they made mine. They stopped calling just to check on me, stopped coming by unless they needed something. When they did visit, they'd walk through my house with appraising eyes, like they were already dividing up the spoils. Last month, I overheard Devon on the phone in my backyard talking to someone about the old man's assets. Called me the old man like I was some stranger, not the father who'd sacrificed everything to give him opportunities I never had. Yeah, the house is probably worth $400,000, maybe more, he said, not knowing I was standing by the window. Plus whatever he's got in savings and investments. We just gotta be patient. Patient. Like they were waiting for me to die so they could cash in. That night, I sat down with my financial records, 40 years worth of careful planning and smart investing. Added up every loan that was never repaid, every emergency that wasn't really an emergency, every investment in their futures that had yielded nothing but more requests for money. $87,000. That's what I'd given them over the past 7 years, not counting the co-signed loans and down payments and monthly help that had become as regular as my Social Security check. $87,000, and not one thank you that felt genuine. Not one attempt to pay back what they owed. Not one sign that they saw me as anything more than a source of income. I'd built my construction business on the principle that every structure needs a solid foundation. But I'd let my children hollow out my foundation while I kept adding to their comfort. The whole thing was ready to collapse. Time to stop being the contractor and start being the demolition crew. The final crack in my foundation came on a Sunday in March, right there in front of God and everybody at my own dining room table. I'd invited the whole family for dinner, Keisha and her kids, Marcus and his latest girlfriend, Devon with that Tiffany woman hanging off his arm like expensive jewelry. Spent all morning cooking Martha's famous pot roast, her cornbread recipe, green beans seasoned just how she used to make them. Should have known something was up when they all showed up at the same time. My children never coordinated anything unless they were planning something. We'd barely finished saying grace when Keisha cleared her throat like she was about to make some kind of announcement. The kids were in the living room watching cartoons, and the adults were gathered around my handmade oak table like it was a boardroom. "Daddy," she started, folding her hands in front of her like she was at a job interview. "We need to talk about your financial situation." My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. "My financial situation?" Marcus leaned forward, putting on his serious face. "We know you've been helping all of us out over the years, and we appreciate it. We really do. But we're worried you're being too generous for your own good." Devon nodded along, using that smooth voice he'd learned in college. "What Marcus is trying to say is that we've done some research, and at your age, you should be protecting your assets, not depleting them." Tiffany actually had the nerve to chime in. "My grandmother went through the same thing. She was so generous with family that she ended up with nothing for herself." I set my fork down slow and deliberate, the way I used to set down my hammer when a job was getting frustrating. "I'm sorry. Who exactly asked for your opinion about my business?" She blinked like she couldn't believe I'd spoken to her that way. Devon jumped in quick. "Dad, she's just trying to help. We all are." "Help with what exactly?" That's when Keisha dropped the hammer. "We think you should sign power of attorney over to me, just temporarily, until we can get your finances organized better." The room went quiet except for the sound of SpongeBob laughing from the TV in the next room. I looked around that table at these 3 people I'd raised from babies. fed from my own plate when times were tight, worked double shifts to keep clothes on their backs and roofs over their heads. You want me to sign over power of attorney? I repeated, making sure I heard right. Just for financial matters, Marcus said quickly. You'd still make all your own decisions about everything else. Devin pulled out a manila folder. They'd come prepared with paperwork. We've already talked to a lawyer, just to see what the process would look like. It's really simple, just a few signatures. I opened that folder and saw my whole life laid out in legal terms. Bank accounts, investment portfolios, the deed to my house, everything I'd worked 40 years to build, ready to be handed over to children who saw me as a burden to be managed. Whose lawyer? I asked. Mine, Devin said, like he was proud of thinking ahead. You went to a lawyer about taking control of my money, and you didn't think to include me in that conversation. Keisha reached across the table like she was going to pat my hand, but I pulled it back. Daddy, we're not trying to control you. We're trying to protect you. Protect me from what? From yourself, Marcus said. And there it was. The truth they'd been dancing around. You give money to anybody who asks. Remember that woman from church who said she needed help with her electric bill? You gave her $500 and found out later she was lying. That was 2 years ago, and it was $50, not $500. The amount doesn't matter, Devin said, sliding into his professional voice. It's the pattern. You're too trusting, too generous. At your age, you need someone looking out for your interests. Tiffany nodded like she was part of the family. My grandmother was the same way. She thought she was helping everyone, but really she was just enabling bad behavior. That's when I lost it. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a cold, quiet anger that started in my chest and spread through my whole body like ice water. Get out, I said. They all looked confused, like they couldn't believe their sales pitch wasn't working. I'm sorry, Keisha said. I said get out, all of you. Take your papers, take your fake concern, and get out of my house. Devin stood up, his face turning red. Dad, you're being unreasonable. We're trying to help you. Help me? I stood up too, and even at 68, I was still taller than any of my boys. You want to help me? Pay back some of that $87,000 you've borrowed over the years. You want to help me? Come visit without asking for money. You want to help me? Show some respect for the man who sacrificed everything to give you opportunities I never had. Marcus's girlfriend looked uncomfortable, probably realizing she'd walked into a family war zone. Tiffany just stared at me like I'd started speaking in tongues. Daddy? Keisha tried again, but I cut her off. Don't daddy me. You came into my house, ate my food, and tried to trick me into signing away everything I've worked for. You think I'm some senile old man who doesn't know what's going on. We never said that, Devin protested. You didn't have to say it. It's written all over your faces. You look at me and see dollar signs, not your father. That's when Keisha made her biggest mistake. She stood up, grabbed her purse, and looked me dead in the eye with more venom than I'd ever seen from her. Fine, she yelled, loud enough that the kids stopped watching TV and came to the doorway. You want to be stubborn? You want to keep throwing your money away on every sob story that comes along? Give me the house keys. What? You heard me? Give me the keys to this house. If you won't protect yourself, I'll do it for you. I'm the oldest, and somebody needs to show some sense around here. The room went dead silent. Even little Jeremiah stopped bouncing his ball. My granddaughter Aaliyah looked scared, like she could feel the anger crackling in the air. I looked at this woman, my firstborn, the baby girl I'd rocked to sleep every night for the first 2 years of her life, standing in my dining room demanding I hand over my keys like I was some child who couldn't be trusted with sharp objects. Get out, I said again, but this time my voice was steady as a plumb line. Daddy, get out! Marcus jumped up, grabbing his girlfriend's hand. Come on, let's go. He needs time to cool off. Devin was still trying to salvage the situation. Dad, just think about what we've said. We'll call you in a few days when everyone's calmed down. But Keisha wasn't done. She grabbed Aaliyah and Jeremiah, heading for the door, but turned back one more time. You know what? Keep your house, keep your money. But don't come crying to us when you're sitting here all alone with nobody to help you. Don't expect us to keep running over here every time you need something. And there it was, the final insult. After years of them running to me for help, she had the nerve to act like I was the one who'd been depending on them. They left in a convoy of cars, doors slamming, engines revving like they were making some kind of statement. I stood at my front window, the window I'd installed myself 30 years ago, watching my children drive away from the house I'd built for them. Little Aaliyah's face was pressed against the back window of Keisha's car, waving goodbye with tears in her eyes. That broke my heart more than anything else. My grandbabies getting caught in the middle of their mama's greed. I walked through my house that night, really looking at it for the first time in years. Every beam I'd cut and placed, every tile I'd laid, every fixture I'd installed with my own hands. This wasn't just a house. It was proof of everything I'd accomplished, everything I'd built from nothing, and they wanted to take it away from me. But I'd been in construction long enough to know that when a structure starts showing cracks, you have two choices: patch them up and hope for the best, or tear it down and rebuild it right. I'd been patching for too long. Time to tear it down. Monday morning came gray and drizzling, the kind of weather that makes old joints ache and memories feel heavier. I sat at my kitchen table with my coffee and the business card I'd kept in my wallet for 15 years. Robert Chen, attorney at law. Bobby had handled the legal work when I incorporated Washington & Sons, drew up my will when Martha got sick. Good man, honest lawyer, which some folks say is a contradiction in terms. Mr. Washington, Bobby's secretary said when I called, Mr. Chen can see you this afternoon if it's urgent. Yes, ma'am, I told her. It's urgent. Bobby's office was downtown in one of those buildings I'd helped construct back in the 80s. Felt strange walking through that lobby, remembering how proud I'd been to see my work standing tall against the Birmingham skyline. Now I was here to protect what I'd built from the very people I'd built it for. Sam, Bobby said, standing up from behind his mahogany desk, a desk I'd built the frame for back when he was just starting out. You sounded upset on the phone. What can I do for you? I told him everything. The years of loans that became gifts, the manipulation, the fake concern about my financial situation, and finally that scene at Sunday dinner. Bobby listened without interrupting, taking notes in that careful way lawyers do. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and shook his head. I've seen this before, Sam. More often than I like to admit. Adult children who see aging parents as walking ATM machines. What are my options? He pulled out a legal pad and started sketching out a plan like it was architectural drawings. First thing, we change your will immediately. Right now, I'm guessing everything goes to your 3 children in equal shares. That's right. We can restructure that. Set up trusts for your grandchildren with specific conditions, college funds, first home purchases, things that actually benefit them long term. As for your children, he paused, choosing his words carefully. We can make provisions, but with strings attached. I like the sound of that. What kind of strings? Repayment of outstanding loans as a condition of inheritance, community service requirements, mandatory financial counseling. We can get creative. He explained how we could protect my assets from any future attempts at financial elder abuse. Power of attorney documents that required multiple signatures, bank accounts with specific withdrawal limits, investments structured to prevent liquidation without proper legal review. The key, Bobby said, is making sure you maintain complete control while you're alive and competent. Nobody can force you to sign over power of attorney, no matter how much they pressure you. I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders for the first time in weeks. How long will all this take? For the basic protections, we can have new documents ready by the end of the week. For the more complex trust structures, maybe a month. Do it, I said, shaking his hand. All of it. My next stop was First National Bank, where I'd done business since 1982. Margaret Williams, the branch manager, had been handling my accounts for 20 years. She knew my family, had processed more loans for my children than either of us cared to count. Mr. Washington, she said, closing her office door behind us. I have to be honest. I've been concerned about some of the activity on your accounts lately. What kind of activity? She pulled up my records on her computer screen. Large cash withdrawals, checks written to your children on a regular basis, transfers to cover overdrafts on accounts you've co-signed for. In banking, we call this pattern financial exploitation of elderly clients. The words hit me like a slap. Elderly client. Financial exploitation. When had I become someone who needed protecting instead of someone who did the protecting? I want to make some changes, I told her. Margaret helped me set up new accounts that require dual signatures for any withdrawal over $500. My old accounts would remain open but with minimal balances. The bulk of my savings and investments moved to accounts my children didn't even know existed. I hate to ask this, Margaret said carefully, but do any of your children have access to your personal information? Social security number, PIN numbers, that sort of thing? I thought about all the times I'd sent them to the bank for me, all the times they'd helped with paperwork when my arthritis was acting up. Probably. We'll issue new cards, new PIN numbers, new account numbers for everything. Clean slate. That evening, I called my accountant, Harold Price. Harold had been doing my taxes since I started Washington & Sons, had helped me invest the profits smart and steady over the years. He wasn't surprised when I told him I wanted to review all my co-signed loans and joint accounts. "Sam, I've been wanting to talk to you about this for months," he admitted. "Your son Marcus has been using that credit card you co-signed for like it's his personal spending account. Devon's car loan payments have been irregular. The bank's called twice asking about late fees. How bad is it?" Harold pulled up his computer files. "Between the three of them, you're on the hook for about $40,000 in potential debt. Credit cards, car loans, that condo down payment you guaranteed for Devon." My stomach clenched. $40,000 on top of the $87,000 I'd already given them outright. I was looking at over $100,000 that my children had cost me in 7 years. "What can we do about it?" "Legally, you're responsible for what you've co-signed until those debts are paid off. But we can prevent any new damage. Remove yourself from joint accounts, refuse to co-sign any future loans, set up legal barriers to protect your remaining assets. Do it." By Thursday, I had appointments scheduled with my insurance agent to review my policies, my investment advisor to restructure my portfolio, and even my doctor to document my mental competency. Bobby's suggestion to protect against any future claims that I wasn't capable of making my own decisions. The hardest part was changing my will. Sitting in Bobby's office, looking at the new documents that would redirect my legacy away from the children I'd raised, felt like admitting failure as a father. "You're not failing them, Sam," Bobby said when I voiced my concerns. "You're finally setting boundaries. Sometimes the most loving thing a parent can do is let their children face the consequences of their own choices." The new will was structured like a blueprint for justice. Keisha, Marcus, and Devon would each inherit $50,000, enough to help if they were truly struggling, but not enough to live on without working. The rest would go to my grandchildren's education trusts, my nephew Jerome's son who was starting his own construction business, and several local charities that had always treated me with respect. But the real surprise was the conditions I'd added. Any of my children who wanted their inheritance would first have to repay every dollar I'd loaned them over the years, with interest calculated at current bank rates. They'd have to complete 50 hours of community service at local homeless shelters or food banks. And they'd have to submit a written apology, acknowledging how they'd taken advantage of my generosity. "Think they'll do it?" Bobby asked. I smiled for the first time all week. "That depends on how badly they need the money." Friday morning, I drove to Home Depot, a store that felt like a second home after 40 years in construction. Walked down the aisle where they kept the locks and deadbolts, the security systems, the hardware that keeps unwanted visitors out. The young man at the counter couldn't have been more than 25, looked at my shopping list and whistled. "You changing out every lock in the house, sir?" "That's right, son, every single one." "Mind if I ask why?" I looked at this young man with his eager face and respectful manner, probably making $8 an hour and still calling me sir. Reminded me of myself at that age, before I learned that the people you love most can hurt you deepest. "Sometimes," I told him, "you got to protect what you've built from the people who want to tear it down." He nodded like that made perfect sense to him. "You need any help installing these? I get off work at 6. I almost said no. I'd been doing this kind of work since before he was born. But something about his respectful offer, his willingness to help an old man without asking for anything in return, reminded me that there were still good people in the world. "What's your name, son?" "Marcus, sir." "Marcus Johnson." "Marcus." Same name as my middle son, but this young man had more character in his little finger than my Marcus had in his whole body. "Tell you what, Marcus Johnson, you help me change these locks tomorrow morning. I'll pay you a fair wage and throw in some lunch. You might learn something useful, His face lit up like Christmas morning. "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir." Driving home with a truck full of new locks and a plan finally in motion, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Control. Not the kind of control that comes from money or power over others, but the quiet satisfaction that comes from taking charge of your own life. My children wanted to manage my affairs. Fine. They were about to find out what good management really looked like. Saturday morning came crisp and clear, the kind of spring day that makes you believe in fresh starts. Young Marcus Johnson showed up at 7 sharp, toolbox in hand, and ready to work. Reminded me why I used to love training young apprentices. They brought energy and respect to the job that my own children had never shown. "Where are we starting, Mr. Washington?" he asked, looking at the pile of new locks and deadbolts I'd laid out on my kitchen table. "Front door first," I said, picking up my drill. "Then we work our way through the whole house, every lock, every deadbolt, every point of entry." As we worked, I found myself explaining things the way I used to explain them to my crews. The importance of precise measurements, the right tools for each job, the satisfaction that comes from doing something correctly the first time. "My daddy always told me that good work speaks for itself," Marcus said, carefully aligning the new deadbolt. "You don't have to make excuses for it or explain it away." Smart boy. Smarter than he probably knew. "Your daddy sounds like a wise man." "Yes, sir. He worked construction too until his back gave out. Always said he wanted to build something that would last longer than he did." I stopped drilling and looked at this young man who understood, without being told, what it meant to build something meaningful. My own children had grown up in this house without ever appreciating the sweat and sacrifice that went into every board and nail. By noon, we'd changed every exterior lock and started on the interior doors. Marcus worked steady and careful, asking good questions, learning from everything I showed him. When we broke for lunch, ham sandwiches and sweet tea on my back porch, he looked around the yard with appreciation. "You built all this yourself?" he asked, taking in the garden beds I'd constructed, the storage shed, the workshop where I still kept my tools. "Every bit of it. Took me 40 years, but I wanted to leave my children something solid, something they could be proud of." Marcus nodded, then asked the question I'd been dreading. "They appreciate what you built for them?" I was quiet for a long time, watching a cardinal build its nest in the oak tree I'd planted when Keisha was born. "Son, the hardest lesson I've learned is that you can't make people appreciate what they didn't earn. My children see this place as their inheritance, not their father's accomplishment." "That's rough, Mr. Washington. My daddy always made sure we understood that everything we had came from his hard work. Made us work for our own stuff, too. Your daddy raised you right." After lunch, while Marcus finished the bedroom locks, I made phone calls that should have been made years ago. First was to my brother Jerome in Atlanta. "Sam!" Jerome's voice boomed through the phone like it always did. "About time you called. How you been, brother?" "I've been better, Jerome. Listen, I need to ask you something. That boy of yours, Michael, he's still trying to get his construction business off the ground?" "You know he is. Working his tail off, doing small jobs, trying to build a reputation." "Why?" "I might have some work for him, big work, and maybe some investment capital if he's got solid business plans." Jerome was quiet for a moment. "Sam, what's going on? This don't sound like you." I told him about the situation with my children, about the changes I was making. Jerome listened without judgment, the way brothers do when they've known each other for 68 years. "I wondered when you was going to see it," he said finally. "Been watching those kids of yours take advantage for years, but wasn't my place to say nothing." "Why didn't you say something? Would you have listened?" He was right. I'd been too blinded by love and guilt to hear criticism of my children, even from my own brother. "Michael's a good boy, Sam. Works hard, treats people right, reminds me of us when we was coming up. You help him get started, he'll make you proud." My next call was to Mount Olive Baptist Church, where I'd been a member for 35 years. Pastor Williams answered the phone himself. "Brother Washington, good to hear from you. We missed you last Sunday." I hadn't been to church since that dinner disaster with my children. Didn't feel like facing the congregation's questions about why my family never sat together anymore. "Pastor, I need to talk to you about something. I want to set up a scholarship fund for young people in the congregation who want to learn trades, construction, plumbing, electrical work. Kids who come from families that can't afford trade school. That's a generous offer, Brother Washington. What brought this on? I've been thinking about legacy, Pastor. About what really matters when a man's time comes. Pastor Williams understood without me having to explain the details. Good pastors have a sense about these things. We'll set up a meeting with the church board. This kind of investment in our young people, it's exactly what this community needs. By evening, young Marcus and I had finished all the locks. Every door in my house now secured with hardware my children had never seen, keys they'd never held. You want me to show you how to change the garage door codes too? Marcus asked, looking at the automatic opener. Smart boy kept impressing me. You know about those systems? Yes, sir. Worked for a security company for a while before I got the job at Home Depot. These older systems are pretty simple to reprogram. Within an hour, even my garage was secured against unwanted entry. Marcus packed up his tools and I handed him $200 for a day's work that should have cost me maybe $50. Mr. Washington, this is too much, he protested. Son, good work deserves good pay. You earned every dollar of that. He smiled and shook my hand with a firm grip. You need any more work done around here, you call me. I mean that. After he left, I walked through my house, testing each new lock, feeling the solid click of deadbolts sliding into place. For the first time in months, my home felt secure. Sunday morning, instead of cooking dinner for ungrateful children, I drove out to Elmwood Cemetery to visit Martha's grave. Brought fresh flowers and sat on the bench I'd installed there myself. Martha, I said to the headstone I'd chosen with care, I know you always said family comes first, but I think you'd understand what I'm doing. Our children lost their way, baby. Lost respect for what we built. Lost appreciation for what we sacrificed. The wind rustled through the trees, and I could almost hear her voice telling me to follow my heart, to do what I knew was right. I'm not abandoning them, I continued. I'm just stop enabling them. There's a difference. Monday morning brought the first test of my new security measures. I was in my workshop, organizing tools that hadn't been touched in months, when I heard car doors slamming in my driveway. 3 cars, Keisha's SUV, Marcus's beat-up sedan, and Devon's BMW. They'd come back. I watched from my workshop window as they approached the front door. Keisha had her key out, ready to let herself in like she had every right to be there. She slid the key into the lock, turned it, and nothing. The deadbolt didn't budge. She tried again, jiggling the key, pushing on the door. Still nothing. The lock's not working. I heard her tell the others. Marcus tried his key in the back door. Same result. Devon walked around the house, checking windows, testing the garage door opener with the remote I'd given him years ago. Nothing. Finally, Keisha knocked on the front door. Knocked like a visitor instead of someone who assumed they had the right to come and go as they pleased. I took my time walking to the door, enjoying the sound of their uncertainty. When I opened it, I made sure to only open it a crack, keeping the security chain in place. Daddy, Keisha said, her voice carefully controlled, our keys don't work. I know, I said. Did you change the locks? I did. She waited for me to explain, to apologize, to invite them in. Instead, I just stood there, looking at my 3 children through the crack in my door like they were strangers I didn't trust. Why? Devon finally asked. Because it's my house, I said simply, and I decide who gets to come inside. The foundation was laid. Now it was time to see what kind of structure my children would build on top of it. Daddy, this is ridiculous, Keisha said, her voice rising with that edge of entitlement I'd heard too many times before. Open this door right now. I don't think so, I replied, still keeping the chain in place. Y'all came here to take over my finances, remember? Told me I needed management. Well, this is me managing my own property. Marcus stepped forward, trying his smooth-talking approach. Pops, come on. We were just worried about you. Maybe we came on too strong, but that don't mean you should lock us out. Lock you out? I almost laughed. Son, you never lived here as an adult. This ain't your house getting locked out of. It's my house I'm protecting. Devon pulled out his phone, probably thinking he could call someone to fix this situation for him. Dad, this is crazy. You can't just change the locks without telling family. Watch me. I started to close the door, but Keisha put her hand against it. Wait, we need to talk. There are things we need to discuss. Like what? Like, she looked at her brothers for support. Like the bills, your utilities, your insurance, your medication costs. We've been helping you manage all that. The lie came so smooth I almost admired it. Really? Which bills have you been paying? Silence. Because according to my records, I've been paying my own bills for 68 years. But you have been running up bills I co-signed for. Marcus, your credit card balance is pushing $15,000. Devin, you missed your car payment again last month. Devin's face went red. How do you know that? Because I pay attention to my money now. Something I should have been doing all along. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a folder. Copies of bank statements, loan documents, a detailed accounting of every dollar I'd given them over the years. Y'all want to talk about financial management? Let's talk. I opened the door fully but didn't invite them in. Just stood in my doorway with my paperwork like a contractor presenting a final bill. Keisha, that food truck dream of yours cost me $12,400. The boutique before that was $8,000. Your emergency loans over the past 2 years total $16,000. That's $36,400. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Marcus, your gambling debts that became my problem, $22,000. Your rent payments I covered, $8,000. Car repairs, utility bills, and general emergencies, $15,000. That's $45,000. Marcus had gone pale. Dad, I never asked you to keep track like that. No, you asked me to forget. Big difference. I turned to Devin. And you, college boy. Your car note, your condo down payment, your credit cards for all them fancy dinners and clothes, $38,000. Plus the $15,000 I loaned you for what you called investment opportunities that never materialized. Devin's jaw was tight. Those were loans, not gifts. I plan to pay you back. With what? You spend more on clothes in a month than most people make. I held up the folder. Total damage, $127,000 in 7 years. That's over $18,000 a year I've been subsidizing y'all's lifestyles. The number hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. Now, I continued, you want to talk about power of attorney so you can manage my finances better. Manage them how? The same way you've managed your own. Keisha tried a different approach. Daddy, we're family. Family helps each other. You're right. Family does help each other. But what I've been doing ain't helping. It's enabling. There's a difference. So what? Marcus asked. You're just cutting us off? After everything we've been through together? Everything we've been through? My voice got harder. Son, what exactly have we been through together? When's the last time you called just to check on me? When's the last time any of you visited without needing money? They looked at each other, searching for an answer that didn't exist. Here's what's going to happen, I said, pulling out another set of papers. I've been to see my lawyer, my accountant, my banker. Y'all want to be treated like adults? Fine, these are repayment schedules for every dollar you owe me. I handed each of them a document. Payment plans, based on your actual incomes, with reasonable interest rates. You pay back what you borrowed. We can talk about rebuilding our relationship. Devin looked at his papers like they were written in a foreign language. You can't be serious. Serious as a heart attack. But Dad, Keisha said, her voice getting desperate. Some of that money was for emergencies, for your grandchildren. Don't. My voice went cold. Don't you dare use those babies as an excuse for your poor choices. Every dollar you took from me was a dollar that could have gone into their college funds. Tiffany, who'd been standing behind Devin looking uncomfortable, finally spoke up. Maybe we should go. This is family business. I looked at this woman who'd criticized my house, my furniture, my life. You're right about one thing. This is family business. But since you felt comfortable giving your opinion about my assets at dinner, I figure you should hear the truth about what kind of man you're planning to marry. Devin grabbed her arm. Let's go. But I wasn't finished. Miss Tiffany, you see that BMW your boyfriend drives? I co-signed for it. That fancy condo y'all been staying in? I helped with the down payment. Those expensive dinners he's been taking you on? Paid for with money he borrowed from his old man. Her eyes went wide, looking between Devin and me. So when you're planning your future with my son, you might want to ask him how he plans to afford it without his daddy's bank account to raid. Devin's face was pure fury. "You're trying to ruin my relationship." "Son, I don't have to ruin nothing. The truth speaks for itself." Marcus tried one more angle. "Dad, what about the grandkids? You're punishing them too." "Am I? Let me tell you what I did for the grandkids while y'all were plotting to take over my finances." I pulled out more papers. College funds for Aaliyah and Jeremiah, managed by the bank with trustees who actually care about their education. When they turn 18, they'll have enough money for any college they want to attend. Keisha's eyes widened. "How much?" "Enough. More than enough. Money that's protected from parents who might see it as an emergency fund for their own problems." "You can't do that," she said. "I'm their mother. And I'm their grandfather who's been supporting them while their mother spent my money on failed businesses. The trusts are legal and binding. The kids will be taken care of, but the money can only be used for education, health care, and housing. No business loans, no emergencies, no bailouts." The three of them stood there in my driveway, looking like they'd been hit by a truck. The power dynamic that had controlled our family for 7 years had just flipped completely. "So what now?" Marcus asked. "We just pretend we're not family anymore?" "We're family," I said firmly. "But being family don't mean being foolish. You want a relationship with me? Earn it. Start by showing some respect for what I've built and sacrificed." Devin crumpled up his repayment schedule. "This is blackmail." "No, son. Blackmail is what y'all been doing to me, using family guilt and fake emergencies to drain my accounts. This is accountability." I stepped back inside my house, ready to close the door. "Y'all know where to find me when you're ready to have an adult conversation about respect and responsibility." "Dad, wait!" Keisha called out, her voice cracking. "What are we supposed to do?" I paused in my doorway, looking at my oldest child, the little girl I'd taught to ride a bike, walked down the aisle at her wedding, held her hand through her divorce. "Same thing I did when I was your age," I said quietly. "Figure it out yourself." And with that, I closed the door on 7 years of being taken advantage of by the people I loved most in the world. Through my window, I watched them standing in my driveway, arguing among themselves, pointing at my house like it had betrayed them. Finally, they got in their cars and drove away, leaving tire marks on the concrete driveway I'd poured myself 40 years ago. The silence that followed felt different than the loneliness I'd known since Martha died. This wasn't emptiness. This was peace. The peace that comes from finally standing up for yourself, even when it cost you everything you thought mattered. My phone started ringing an hour later. First Keisha, then Marcus, then Devin. I let them all go to voicemail. When I finally listened to the messages, they ranged from angry to pleading to threatening, but not one of them included an apology. Not one acknowledged what they'd put me through. Not one showed any real understanding of why I'd taken these steps. They were still thinking about what I owed them, not what they owed me. The foundation was solid now. Time to see what kind of life I could build on top of it. 3 weeks passed without a word from my children. No calls, no visits, no messages demanding money or explanations. The silence felt strange at first, like when construction noise suddenly stops and you realize how loud it had been. But as the days went by, that silence became something precious. The sound of my own life without other people's drama filling it up. I used that quiet time to start building something new. First call I made was to my nephew Michael in Atlanta. Jerome's boy had inherited the family work ethic. 32 years old, married to a good woman named Angela, trying to build his own construction business from the ground up. When I offered to invest $50,000 in Washington & Sons Atlanta, he couldn't believe it. "Uncle Sam, are you sure?" he asked over the phone, voice thick with emotion. "That's a lot of money." "Son, I spent more than that on my own children's foolishness in the past 2 years. At least this investment has a chance of paying off. I won't let you down, Uncle Sam, I promise you that." "I know you won't, Michael. You got the character for it." We spent 2 hours on the phone, going over his business plans, his client base, his vision for the future. This boy had done his homework, detailed budgets, marketing strategies, a 5-year growth plan that showed real thinking behind it. Everything my own children had never bothered to develop. "One condition," I told him. "The money comes with mentorship. I want to help you avoid the mistakes I made, both in business and with family." "Yes, sir. I'd be honored to learn from you." That weekend, I drove down to Atlanta to see his operation firsthand. Michael and Angela lived in a modest house in a working-class neighborhood, not fancy but clean and well-maintained. Their workshop was organized like a military operation, every tool in its place, materials sorted and labeled, work orders filed properly. "This is how you run a business," I told Angela, who kept the books and handled customer service. With respect for the work and attention to detail, she smiled, wiping her hands on a work apron. "Michael learned from watching your brother Jerome, said the Washington men don't do anything halfway. Their two kids, ages 8 and 10, were helping sort screws and bolts after school. Real work, age-appropriate, teaching them the value of contributing to the family business. Watching them reminded me of the Saturday mornings when I'd tried to teach my own children about construction, only to have them complain about getting dirty or being bored. Uncle Sam, little Jerome Jr. asked, "Are you really going to help Daddy grow his business?" "That's the plan, son. Can you teach me how to build houses too?" I knelt down to his level, looking into eyes that sparkled with genuine curiosity. "You keep that attitude, and I'll teach you everything I know." Michael walked me through a job site where they were renovating a community center in a neighborhood that reminded me of where I'd grown up. Honest work for honest people, making a real difference in the community. "This is what I want to build," he said, gesturing at the half-finished renovation. "Not just buildings, but opportunities. Jobs for local people, training for young folks who want to learn trades." I pulled out my checkbook right there in the dust and noise of that job site, wrote him a check for $50,000 while construction workers watched with wide eyes. "Uncle Sam," Michael said, his voice barely steady, "I don't know what to say." "Don't say nothing. Just build something worthy of the Washington name." Back in Birmingham, I started the second phase of my rebuilding project, called Pastor Williams about that scholarship fund we'd discussed. "Brother Washington," he said when I walked into his office, "I've been praying about our conversation. The board is very excited about your proposal." "Good. I want to start with a $50,000 endowment, full scholarships for 5 young people each year to attend trade schools." Pastor Williams nearly choked on his coffee. "50,000? Brother, that's incredibly generous." "It's incredibly necessary. We got too many young people thinking college is the only path to success, racking up debt for degrees that don't lead to jobs. Meanwhile, we got a shortage of skilled tradespeople. Plumbers, electricians, carpenters, HVAC technicians, good-paying jobs that can't be outsourced." We spent an hour working out the details. The scholarships would cover tuition, tools, and living expenses for trade school programs. Recipients would have to maintain good grades, complete community service hours, and mentor younger students interested in trades. "What do you want to call the scholarship program?" Pastor Williams asked. I thought about Martha, about the values she'd tried to instill in our children, about the legacy I wanted to leave behind. The Martha Washington Memorial Scholarship for Skilled Trades. My wife always believed in honest work and helping others. "That's beautiful, Brother Washington." She'd be proud. My third investment was in young Marcus Johnson, the boy who'd helped me change my locks. I'd been thinking about his respectful attitude, his eagerness to learn, his appreciation for good craftsmanship. Called him up and asked if he wanted to make some real money. "Mr. Washington, you already paid me more than fair for that lock job." "Son, I'm talking about regular work, part-time construction projects, learning the business from the ground up. If you're interested in making this a career." The excitement in his voice reminded me of myself at that age. "Yes, sir. When do I start?" "Saturday morning. Wear clothes you don't mind getting dirty." That Saturday, I took Marcus to the workshop behind my house that hadn't seen much use since I retired. Showed him my tools, some of them older than he was, and started teaching him the fundamentals. How to read blueprints, how to measure twice and cut once, how to respect the materials and the craft. "My daddy always said good tools last longer than the men who use them," Marcus said, running his hand along my old carpenter's square. "Your daddy was right. These tools built half of Birmingham. Now they're going to help build your future." We started with simple projects. A bookshelf for his mother, storage cabinets for his apartment, a doghouse for his neighbor. But with each project, I taught him more than just carpentry. I taught him about business, about dealing with customers, about the pride that comes from creating something lasting with your own hands. "Mr. Washington," he said one afternoon as we were finishing a custom entertainment center. "Why are you doing all this for me? You barely know me." I set down my sander and looked at this young man who showed up on time, worked hard without complaining, and treated me with the respect my own children had forgotten. "Son, I spent 7 years trying to build up people who didn't want to be built up. Now I'm investing in someone who appreciates the opportunity. What happened with your kids, if you don't mind me asking?" I told him the whole story while we cleaned up the workshop. Marcus listened without judgment, nodding at the parts that made sense, shaking his head at the parts that didn't. "That's rough, Mr. Washington. But you did the right thing. My daddy always said you can't help people who won't help themselves. Your daddy sounds like he raised you right. He tried. Died when I was 17, but he taught me enough to know right from wrong. That evening, sitting on my back porch with a glass of sweet tea, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Not hope that my children would change. That ship had sailed. But hope that my life still had purpose, that my experience and resources could make a difference for people who deserved it. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. Keisha's number on the caller ID. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hello, Keisha." "Daddy." Her voice was small, tired. "I need to talk to you." "About what?" "About things. About us." "Can I come over?" I looked at my house, my sanctuary, the place I'd finally made secure from people who wanted to take advantage of me. "You can come to the front door," I said, "but you can't come inside unless you're ready to have an honest conversation about respect and responsibility." "I am, Daddy. I really am." "We'll see." An hour later, Keisha pulled into my driveway, alone. No kids, no brothers, no backup plan. She walked to my front door with her shoulders slumped like she was carrying a heavy load. When I opened the door, she looked older than her 38 years. Tired, stressed, like someone who'd been forced to face reality for the first time in a long time. "Hi, Daddy." "Keisha, can we talk?" I studied my oldest child's face, looking for signs of manipulation, for the calculated expressions I'd learned to recognize. Instead, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Humility. "Yeah," I said, stepping aside. "I think it's time we did." For the first time in 3 weeks, I let one of my children back into the house I'd built with my own hands. But this time, it was on my terms, in my time when I was ready. The rebuilding wasn't just about investing in other people. Sometimes it was about giving your own family one last chance to prove they could change. But only one chance. The foundation was too solid now to risk it on empty promises. 1 year later, I'm sitting on the same front porch where this whole story started, but everything has changed. The house looks the same from the outside. Same brick I laid myself, same oak tree I planted when Keisha was born, same driveway where my children used to park their cars like they owned the place. But the foundation underneath it all is stronger now, built on respect instead of exploitation, choice instead of obligation. Keisha comes by every other Sunday now, but she knocks first and waits to be invited in. That conversation we had a year ago, the one where she finally broke down and admitted how she'd been using me, wasn't pretty. Took 3 hours and a box of tissues, but we got to the truth of it. "Daddy," she'd said that night, tears streaming down her face, "I don't know when I stopped seeing you as my father and started seeing you as a resource. When did it start feeling like you deserved my money instead of being grateful for it?" She thought about that for a long time. After Mama died, I think. I was so angry, so scared about raising the kids alone. And you were there, always ready to help, always saying yes. It got easy to expect it. Easy to take advantage. Yeah. Her voice was barely a whisper. Easy to take advantage. She's been paying me back $50 a week for the past year. Not much, but it's consistent, and more importantly, it's respectful. She got a steady job at the hospital, working in administration. No more get-rich-quick schemes, no more business plans that exist only on paper. Just honest work for honest pay. The kids, my grandbabies Aaliyah and Jeremiah, they still come by, but now they help with chores around the house. Real work that teaches them the value of earning what you get. Aaliyah's 13 now, smart as a whip, talking about becoming an engineer. Jeremiah's 11 and loves working in my workshop with young Marcus Johnson. Marcus, my son, not the boy. That's a different story. He came by about 6 months ago, desperate and angry, demanding I give him money to cover some gambling debts he'd racked up. When I refused, he threatened to sue me, said I was discriminating against him in favor of Keisha. Son, I told him through the crack in my door, you can't sue me for refusing to enable your bad choices. And if you think lawyers are the answer to your problems, you're about to learn an expensive lesson about how the legal system works. He stormed off, and I haven't seen him since. Heard from Jerome that he's living in a studio apartment on the south side, working 2 part-time jobs to make ends meet. It hurts my heart, but sometimes people have to hit bottom before they're willing to climb back up. Devin's story is the most complicated. That confrontation with Tiffany cost him his relationship. She broke up with him 2 weeks later when she realized his lifestyle was built on borrowed money, lost the fancy condo when he couldn't make the payments without my help, had to trade the BMW for a used Honda. But something interesting happened after he lost all the external things he thought defined him. He started working harder at his job, started taking it seriously instead of treating it like something beneath him. Got a promotion 6 months ago, then another one 3 months after that. He came by last month with a check for $5,000, partial payment on what he owes me. Dad, he said, standing in my doorway in a regular suit instead of those designer clothes he used to wear, I know this doesn't cover everything, but it's a start. It's a good start, son. I've been thinking about what you said, about earning respect instead of expecting it. I think I'm starting to understand what you meant. What do you think I meant? That respect isn't something you inherit. It's something you build, like a house. Brick by brick, choice by choice. I smiled at that. Boy finally understood something about construction. The real success story, though, is young Marcus Johnson. That boy has turned into one hell of a craftsman and an even better man. He's working full-time for Michael's company in Atlanta now, managing the Birmingham branch we opened 6 months ago. Washington & Sons has expanded to 3 cities, employing 47 people, all because I invested in someone who valued the opportunity. Marcus Johnson married his girlfriend last spring, bought a little house in the same neighborhood where I raised my children. Asked me to walk him down the aisle since his daddy wasn't there to do it. Proudest moment I've had in years. Mr. Washington, he said at his wedding reception, I want everyone to know that this man took a chance on me when nobody else would. Taught me not just how to build houses, but how to build a life. The Martha Washington Memorial Scholarship has funded 32 young people through trade school programs. 3 of them are working for Washington & Sons now. 5 others have started their own businesses. Every one of them sends me updates on their progress, pictures of their work, thank you cards that my own children never bothered to write. Pastor Williams calls it a miracle. I call it investing in people who appreciate the investment. The house itself tells the story of what I've built over this past year. The workshop is busy again. Tools getting used, projects getting completed. The extra bedroom has become an office where I review business plans for young entrepreneurs, manage the scholarship program, keep track of investments that actually grow instead of just disappearing. My financial advisor, a different one than the children knew about, tells me I'm worth more now than I was before I cut them off. Turns out when you stop hemorrhaging money to ungrateful people, your net worth starts improving. But the real measure of success isn't in the bank accounts or the business ventures. It's in the peace I feel every morning when I wake up in my own house, knowing that nobody's going to come by expecting handouts. Nobody's going to manipulate me with fake emergencies. Nobody's going to make me feel guilty for protecting what I've worked a lifetime to build. This afternoon, little Jeremiah is in the workshop with me, learning how to sandwood properly. His approach reminds me of his grandfather. Careful, methodical, respectful of the tools and materials. Granddaddy, he asks, running his small hand along the smooth surface we've been working on. How come you taught me to do this, but you never taught my mama? It's a good question, one that gets to the heart of everything that went wrong and everything I'm trying to make right. I tried to teach your mama, son, but you can't teach someone who doesn't want to learn. You can't build character in someone who doesn't value hard work. But she's working hard now, isn't she? She is. Sometimes people have to lose everything before they understand what's valuable. Is that why you changed the locks? To teach her a lesson? Smart boy. Sees things clearly. I changed the locks to protect what I'd built, Jeremiah. But yes, it taught her some lessons too. Sometimes the people we love need to learn that love doesn't mean letting them take advantage of us. He nods like that makes perfect sense to him. Mama says you're not mean, you're just fair. What do you think? I think you're teaching us how to be strong. Like this house. You built it strong so it would last. That evening, as the sun sets over Birmingham and the cardinals nest in the oak tree that's grown tall and strong over the past 43 years, I feel something that took me 68 years to fully understand. Contentment, not happiness. That comes and goes like weather. Contentment, the deep satisfaction that comes from knowing you've built something lasting, something worthy, something that will stand long after you're gone. My legacy isn't in the children who disappointed me or the money I wasted trying to buy their respect. My legacy is in the young people I've invested in who will carry forward the values of hard work and integrity. It's in the businesses that provide honest employment, the scholarships that create opportunities, the examples I've set about standing up for yourself even when it costs you everything you thought mattered. The foundation is solid now, strong enough to support whatever comes next, built to last through storms and seasons, anchored in bedrock that can't be shaken by people who mistake kindness for weakness. I built this house to shelter my family. Now it shelters my dignity, my self-respect, and my peace of mind. Sometimes the most important construction project is rebuilding yourself. And sometimes, the most valuable thing you can build is the strength to say no to people who only know how to take. The house on Maple Street still stands, 43 years after I laid its foundation. It'll stand for 43 more, long after I'm gone to join Martha in that better place she's waiting for me. And when that day comes, I'll know I left behind something solid, something real, something built on the right foundation. Not bad for an old carpenter who finally learned the difference between helping and enabling. Not bad at all.